wish I can be an optimist, but we are far from that point. And if we are to start with what's happening in Syria, the many aspects of division that we are seeing right now, for starters, the SDF, which is a coalition of Kurdish factions, for example, control about 30% to 35% of Syria's territory, including the Kurdish regions in the northeast and the city of Deir ez-Zor in the east and the border with Iraq. And of course, it doesn't seem that these factions are in a harmonious relationship with the other armed factions that took power in Syria. And of course, since Turkey is one of the main patrons and the main supporters of the new Syrian government, or the factions that constitute the new Syrian government, and they are in a state of open hostility with these Kurdish factions that they claim are tied to the PKK, a secessionist terrorist organization inside Turkey, then of course we do not see how stability will be attained. And as we speak, some factions that are bankrolled and armed by Turkey are fighting the Kurdish militants or the Kurdish armed groups in cities like Manbij, for example, in the northeast. And even there are reports of Turkish airstrikes to support these militants. So, for example, this is one picture of discord and disunity that we see in Syria, for example. Another one is, as far as I know, there was a second government in the city of Azaz formed by the so-called Syrian National Army, which was also funded and supported by Turkey. And this transitional government, as far as I know, did not disband yet. So as we speak, there is another government in Syria, another rebel government. So will it disband and join the one in Damascus? These questions remain to be answered. Mm-hmm. And when this coalition that is within the ruling entity in Damascus that will basically, or probably will receive some sort of international recognition, are they a cohesive political force, or are they just a ragtag of armed groups and factions that were only united by the goal to topple Assad? Because they come from various ideological backgrounds. Yes, most of them are of the Islamist inclination. However, they are different. Some of them are jihadists, some of them are not jihadists, some of them are pragmatic, some of them really aren't. And we can even see that from the videos that we have seen coming out of Damascus and the behavior displayed by many of these armed factions. So, for example, you find the leader of Tahrir Al-Sham, Ahmed Al-Shara, also known, of course, as Abu Muhammad Al-Julani, a former, or not a former, he still is listed as an international terrorist, so that we can remind our audiences as well. He spoke very tolerant words and with a very reconciliatory tone, for example. However, members of his own movement and other armed factions are going on a killing spree on some parts of Syria, and are killing POWs and are killing former army soldiers, and there is video evidence of that. So do they actually exercise actual control over their militants and their armed elements on the ground? This remains to be seen. So, and at the end, are they willing to restore the military and security integrity of the Syrian state? Now the Syrian army basically does not exist anymore. Are they willing to reconstitute the army in order to maintain, and the security services, albeit of course after reforming them, to maintain some sort of stability, or would they be content with the current armed formations that are far from organized, for example? Yes. So these all remain to be seen.
Dr. Osman, one final question now. What about other parties concerned? How do global powers, namely Russia and the US, perceive the current Syrian government? And what are the expected next moves?
Well, let's start with the United States. The US, of course, as I said before, I believe they had a big role, and President Biden even took credit for the fall of President Assad. So the Americans are content with the results of what happened, and it seems now they are discussing or basically trying to pitch the idea that they may drop or raise Hayat Tahrir Al-Sham from the terrorism lists. This will be a major act of recognizing the current state of affairs inside Syria. And the United States maintains a military presence inside Syria in order to fight ISIS and to protect the oil fields as well. This is what they won't admit, but President Trump in his previous administration did admit that very openly while he was president. So for their part, they will have to try to mediate the conflict between their two allies, the armed factions that control Damascus and parts of northern Syria and central Syria, and the Kurds, who are also funded and supported by the United States. On the other hand, Russia, they received a major blow by what has happened, but it seemed that what happened was basically coordinated with the Russians, because they did not put up a fight to protect President Assad. And it seems that their bases, their Hmaymim air base and a huge naval base in Tartus, are untouched so far. It's reported that they have reached an understanding with the militants not to attack them. However, is this a temporary accommodation of the Russians, or will the Russians manage to maintain a permanent presence in Syria? However, they are not as much as an influential actor as they used to be anymore.